Here's a question I want to ask the country tonight. Why is our government, why is the British state more interested in controlling our speech than our borders? Ever wondered that? For years, the political and media class in this country have told us to look the other way. They've said that it is racist, irresponsible, or misinformation to ask uncomfortable questions about what is really happening right here in our own country. Well, once again, today the lid has been blown off because, shockingly, it's been revealed that the Labour government, has been running a secretive Whitehall spy department to target social media posts that have dared to criticise those migrant hotels and two-tier policing. Last August, at the height of the summer social unrest after the Southport atrocity, the government was sat secretly reporting social media content written by understandably concerned citizens. Interestingly, the emails in question were recovered not by people here in Britain, but by an American congressional committee. They show civil servants complaining to tech firms, including social media giants like TikTok, about a range of content posted by Brits that focused on issues like immigration, asylum seekers, and two-tier policing. Maybe even on my own Twitter or X feed, who knows? One post flagged by the government unit with urgency included a screenshot of a rejected Freedom of Information request about the location of asylum hotels and a reference of asylum seekers as undocumented fighting-age males. Well, I know I've said many similar things on my own social media, so I'm probably in this list. Officials working for Peter Keir, the technology secretary, yes, the same one who just said Nigel Farage supports Jimmy Savile if he opposes the Online Safety Act. Well, Peter Keir flagged a collection of posts and videos with concerning narratives to social media bosses, warning that they are exacerbating tensions on the streets and asking Big Tech what action it plans to take. This was in early August as the Southport riots threatened to spread across the country. Well, the dossier that has emerged as the government fights accusations that the UK is censoring social media with the Online Safety Act, including from allies of US President Donald Trump, is causing concern. In fact, just hours ago, the Trump administration told journalists it was, and I quote, greatly concerned by the latest revelations from inside Downing Street, mere days after President Trump met with Keir Starmer up in Scotland. Of course, Keir Starmer there reaffirming his apparent commitment to free speech. Well, a US State Department spokesman has said this: one of the reasons free speech is so important is that it enables citizens to have accurate information and honest conversations about policy failures of the ruling class. Immigration is a prime example of this. We are monitoring free speech developments in the UK closely and with great concern. Well, never mind the Americans, we should all be concerned by this latest bombshell from the corridors of power. While the Labour government spent last summer publicly scolding the British people for spreading what they called misinformation, they were at the very same time using a secret spying unit to encourage social media platforms to suppress the people's legitimate concerns. We have since found out that these were, of course, valid worries about the state of the country as more information on the background of Southport attacker Axel Ruda-Cabana was gradually drip-fed to the British public. And with another weekend of migrant hotel protests expected right across the nation this weekend, how can we be sure that they're not still monitoring our social media today? Anger in Britain is building, make no mistake about that. And if citizens feel that they cannot trust this government and that the government does not trust them to share their own views online, that anger could soon reach boiling point. Well, to discuss this tonight with me on the show is Sam Armstrong from the Free Speech Union. Sam, how concerned should people out there be about this misinformation unit, this spying unit, which apparently appears to be operating at the heart of our government?
Well, I think it strikes right at the heart of our democracy. This is a Labour government that was elected with 34% of the vote, 20% of the British population, that since it has entered office has systematically and comprehensively attacked anybody that seeks to criticise it. And this isn't just people online. Some of the things that it was talking about wanting social media platforms to clamp down on were criticisms levelled against it by the official opposition, by the most popular political party in Britain. When a government that is elected on such a slim majority of public votes gets into office on the back of the vagaries of our electoral system, and then when it arrives there, seeks to stamp out any reasonable criticism of it, that to me is more akin to what we're used to seeing in kind of basket case third world dictatorships than what you'd expect in the mother of parliaments.
Yeah, now Labour people tonight would roll their eyes watching the show, but the reality is over the last year, as you say, we've had a number of disturbing things go on. We've seen key allies of Keir Starmer, Morgan McSweeney, companies that he's been involved with, going to America saying they want to kill social media platforms. We've got the new, very dodgy definition of Islamophobia, which we've talked about on this show, which is clearly an attempt to try and control free speech. We've got Yvette Cooper saying at different points over the last year she wants to expand the use of non-crime hate incidents, which some people would say are also an attempt to control free speech in this country. Is it too much to say, Sam, given all of that, that actually what we are living through is a full-blown attack on free speech, free expression, individual liberty, all of those things that fundamentally make this country what it is?
Yes, and it gives me grave concern, but you cannot escape the inevitable conclusion that this is a deliberate attempt to strike fear into those speaking out. And of course, the paradigm example of that is the fact that you have a mother of previous good character in this country that is sat in a prison cell for longer than many of the members of grooming gangs that committed the most vile, disgusting crimes that we've ever seen in this country.
Connolly. This is a case of Lucy Connolly still in prison because she tweeted something.
And judges in the Court of Appeal simply didn't want to know when a case was brought before them that pointed out the gross imbalance between the sentence that she received for a tweet that was no doubt wrong, no doubt unwise, but those who commit serious criminal offences.
Just before I turn to the panel, because I want to get their reaction, let me just ask you this question. What is it about this Labour government? What do you think is driving this obsession with controlling our speech rather than controlling our borders? Because, this new spy unit, while, people out there sharing views that the Labour government find uncomfortable, views I share every day on social media, let's shut down the hotels, let's control our borders. Why don't they actually just prioritise dealing with the root cause, which is our borders are completely out of control, rather than just obsessing with the symptoms of that, with people's anger and frustration online?
I think this is a government that's come into office and is terrified by the lack of power it finds itself possessing, having taken power. It is surrounded by the fact it can't get anything done out there in the country. It can't deal with the borders problem. It can't deal with the NHS. It can't deal with the country. And then it deals with a population that they feel is increasingly out of control electorally, but also is prepared, I think, to go out onto the streets to express these views stridently at times. And I think that this is a government that is very, very, very afraid of the British people, particularly the British working classes. Well,
to discuss this a little bit more, I'm joined by commissioning editor at The Spectator, Lara Brown, and Lambeth councillor and member of Momentum's National Committee, Martin Abrams. Martin, this is a war on free speech, is it not?
Well, Matt, I'm a strong believer in freedom of speech, but when that delves into hatred and incitement to violence, then that clearly has crossed a line. I mean, I'm not here to defend the government in any way, shape or form here, but what I would say is that if you're going to take disagreement with this, then Sam and others have to take disagreement with what's happened to groups like Palestine Action and all the people that have recently been...
Well, hang on. That's a bit of a dodgy comparison. If I'm on X tonight saying, let's shut down the migrant hotels, it's not quite the same as invading military property and assets and attacking infrastructure of the state.
This is about freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and attacks on the right to peaceful protest and peaceful civil disobedience.
That's not quite what Palestine Action did, but
what I find with the Freedom of Speech Union is that they only want freedom of speech for things that they agree with.
Okay.
They don't want freedom of speech for things that they disagree with.
Let's give Sam Armstrong the right to reply on that one.
No, 2 days ago I was speaking to a Momentum member, Corbynite backing Labour supporter that had found himself hauled into a police station for speaking about corruption in his local police and fire service in his area. His own union didn't want to help him. He came to us. That was a Momentum member that felt that his old comrades on the left, you and your supporters, had abandoned him.
Indeed. Well, just before, do you want to come back on that? Because I'd like to get Lara Brown's comments on this.
What I would say is that I know the Freedom of Speech Union have been particularly critical of the national demonstrations for Palestine that have been going on, pretty much every single week during this genocide.
Well, I'm very critical of them. We've seen pro-Hamas supporters. We've seen Hezbollah supporters.
Matt, come on, there's less arrests at those demonstrations than there are at any Premier League football match.
But that's because I think the police have gone soft on them.
And this completely demonstrates my point. Freedom of speech for me, but not for thee. And that's what you're getting at here, Matt. You want freedom of speech for your point of view, but not everyone's point of view.
Interesting. Lara Brown, do you want to come in on this?
Well, let's talk about where we're seeing freedom of speech suppressed today. And that is reasonable and fair criticism of mass migration. If you look at the story, claims made on Twitter, or X, which were completely true. One of the tweets flagged talked about an influx of fighting-age undocumented males. That is an accurate description of asylum hotels, was flagged. My position on freedom of speech is very simple. It's absolutist. You should be allowed to state your views on government policy. I will defend that on the left, I'll defend it on the right. But what we are seeing is a clamping down of all views that are critical of the Labour Party. We were initially told that this was about disinformation. We were promised that the raft of legislation that we had and monitoring was to stop fake news, which already worries me. But we've now crossed paths into the fact you can't notice and object to and point out things that are actually happening on the streets in your community. And that is a very scary world to live in. I think with the raft of legislation we've seen coming in, with the Malicious Communications Act, with the Online Safety Act, which means that 16-year-olds who are going to get the vote in a couple of months aren't allowed to watch certain speeches given in Parliament on social media. It is, and with this spy unit in Whitehall, it is very clear we're not living in a country anymore with freedom of speech.
Indeed. Martin, can I ask you a question? Because words like hatred, hate, xenophobia, far right, I'm old enough to have lived through can remember the 90s and the 2000s. These words are being expanded, in my view, to shut down debate and dissent. So if I tweeted tonight, for example, we should shut down all of the migrant hotels, we should detain and deport illegal migrants because they're entering this country illegally. In your mind, is that classify as hate speech that should be censored?
No. Right. Hate speech would be, overt racism, things like Islamophobia, things like anti-Semitism, things like anti-black racism, anti...
So if I said Islam poses a fundamental threat to Western nations, would that be hate?
That would be Islamophobic, Matt.
So you would say that should be censored in the public debate?
I mean, it's getting to the point where it would cross that Rubicon, Matt.
So this, Sam, is where I start to get terrified, because I see people on the left saying, well, let's shut down that view, which is, well, actually, it's an entirely legitimate view. Islam has a fundamentally different view of the rule of law.
And, of course, the crucial thing there is you're criticising an idea. Yeah. You are criticising a belief. And for as long as this country has been successful, we have been open to ridicule ideas, to ridicule beliefs, not people. There's nothing about saying that Islam is a fundamental threat to Western values that is a criticism of any individual Muslim. That's a criticism of an idea. Indeed. And we hear all too clearly that those on the far left and those in government want to clamp down on that. I should just say as a point of balance that this counter-disinformation unit and indeed the Online Safety Act that is having such a deleterious effect on free speech was actually introduced by the Conservative government.
Well, indeed. Well, listen, I'm not here to defend the Conservatives or the Labour Party. I tell you that. I think the Uniparty presided over this fiasco.